Madam Chair, it is 5:30.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I call this meeting of Planning and Zoning to order. We're going to start with a roll call. Shelby?
Cindy Scroggins.
Here.
Jeff Lawrence.
Here.
Daryl Whitworth.
Here.
Jim Giroux.
Here.
Janice Menking.
Here.
Tom Musselman.
Here.
Holly Rickard.
Here.
Tim Dooley.
Here.
Steve Thomas.
Here.
All right. Thank you. We have a full house tonight. All right. We're going to start with item number 4, which is public comments. So if there's anyone here who would like to make comments about any item that's on the agenda or any other item, it's your chance to make those comments. We limit those comments to 3 minutes. So is there anyone here who would like to make any public comments? Is there anyone online, Shelby?
No, ma'am.
All right. All right, then we'll go on to our public hearings this evening. We have 3 of them. We're going to start with public hearing 5A, which is a request Z2212 by Roger and Joan Schrenk to consider a conditional use permit per section 3.110 to operate an STR unoccupied in an R2 zoned area located in the historic overlay district on property located at 109 East College. I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I make a motion, we open public hearing.
Motion by Jim. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Tim. Any discussion? Tom. That was a combination between Tom and Tim. Yeah. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Y'all shrinks. If y'all would come up and tell us about your project, we'd appreciate that. All right. Hold on just a moment. That sounds like that's not. Yeah. People turn that on and off. There's a little switch on.
Button at the top, on top of it.
Yes, we have a lovely home in the historic district. It's R2. We're surrounded by other short-term rentals, and so we have turned this into, we would like to turn this into a short-term rental as well. We've added on a beautiful front porch, and we feel like it's a great property. We haven't had really any issues with the surrounding properties that are short-term rentals. Especially in the past year, it seems like they've all come into compliance, and we're real excited to get something started on this.
Okay, we'll see if anyone else has any comments.
Okay.
Close the public hearings and see what staff has to say. Unless you have anything else to add to that?
Well, we submitted all the paperwork and requirements that were listed, the parking and the zoning and all the information on the list. So we're glad to answer any questions.
Oh, thank you so much. Is there anyone here who wants to make any comments on this public hearing?
I move to go out of public hearing back into regular session.
Second.
All right, motion by Tim, a second by Daryl. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, Garrett, do you have any comments on this?
Good evening, Chair and Commission members. So this is the first application we've received for a conditional use permit under the new 2022 STR ordinance. As the Shrinks mentioned, it is located in an R2 zone within the historic district, which does require a conditional use permit. This subject tract, I've actually passed out a map. Everybody have a copy, kind of indicating the adjacent zoning, which is R2 zoning to the south, C2 commercial to the east, and a combination of R1 and C1 to the north. We've also shown the uses on that map. So as you can see, it's entirely bordered by STR uses, as well as some commercial uses to the east and south. It does meet the requirements as far as parking goes. We've had a really good time working with the Schranks, addressing some of the staff's concerns. But we did send out public notification letters. We did receive one letter of support. I believe Shelby handed out that from a property on Schubert Street, or I'm sorry, Orchard Street, if I recall. So as presented, the proposed STR and occupied use meets the criteria for a conditional use permit, primarily because of the surrounding uses. So staff is recommending approval conditioned on review and inspection and approval of an STR permit application and payment of applicable fees. In this case, it would be $250 for a 2-bedroom unit. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you. So we're on action item number 6A to discuss, consider, and make a recommendation regarding the request Z 2212. So do any commission members have any questions or comments?
Make a motion, we approve Z 2212 with staff's specifications of fees and inspection. Second.
Motion by Jim, second by Tom. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, the next item is public hearing 5B, request Z 2213 by Brian Benson with Jet Capital LLC to consider a conditional use permit for section 3.700 to allow a drive-through or drive-in facilities for property located at 1511 East Main Street. Entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Make a motion, we open public hearing.
By Jim, do I have a second?
Second.
Bunch of second by Cindy. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Are you ready to make your presentation? Thank you.
Good evening, committee. I'm Brian Benson from San Angelo. I'm the franchisee for HTO. We have the territory here in Fredericksburg. This will be my, we've got 3 building right now. We have 3 that are currently open, 2 in Lubbock, 1 in San Angelo. HTO is an iced tea franchise. We have 24 flavors of iced tea. We also kind of have it as a convenience store setting. It's self-serve. We also provide, sell Yeti products, ice, water, hydro flask, snack foods like My Kind bars, pop chips. Real friendly environment, real Texas friendly environment. We play Texas country music in there. Franchise is fairly new, started in about 2018. I was actually the first franchisee that started, and now that was May 4th of 2018 when I signed my first franchise agreement, and now there's 378. So they're popping up all over the state and really the southern United States. So I'm excited to bring this to Fredericksburg. If there's any other questions or anything else that you guys have, I'll entertain answering.
All right. Is there anyone here who'd like to make comments on this public hearing? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Make that motion.
Second.
Motion by Jim, a second by Daryl. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, let's go to action item number 6B, discussion, consideration, and recommendation regarding request Z 2213 by Brian Benson to consider the conditional use permit. Garrett?
Yes, ma'am. So again, this is a conditional use permit to allow the drive-through use in specifically. Once again, the subject tract has frontage on both Friendship Lane and US 290 East, bordered by M2 zoning to the south, C2 zoning to the west, and C2 PUD zoning to the north. And then we have the public facilities to the east, the city's water reclamation facility. So this lot was part of the original Feller PUD that was developed for the original Walmart in town. It's always been contemplated as a drive-through. If you look at page 43 of your packet, it even references a drive-through. So just took a little while to develop it, but staff has reviewed the plan. It meets all the applicable criteria. So we are recommending approval. Conditioned upon site and construction plan approval, including entry corridor design standards, as well as landscaping and screening. And we're also wanting to note that signage needs to be in accordance with the city sign ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments?
I'm a very poor reader, plans, et cetera. Is there any inside seating here?
No, sir.
There, absolutely none. Thank you.
So the, go ahead.
Is it walk up? If not,
So you come in the store and like I said, it's kind of convenience store. setting.
Okay.
It's self-serve. We have
Okay.
bubblers that have all the food flavors. You can go and test them, take your cup, get your eyes, get your seating, shop for any snack food, go to the counter, pay out.
so, thank you.
So the entrance is going down Friendship. You'll go into the Sutherland's parking lot there, and then the other exit is the entrance off the Sutherland's parking lot onto 290 East.
Correct, yeah, both of those.
It's
The
common
existing-
access.
They're already out.
It shares. Yes, the
ones that
existing
are
access
existing,
drives. Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Questions, comments, motions?
Move we approve it as presented with the, what's the stipulation about the signage for sure.
Signage, what was the fourth?
And what was the other thing, whatever was on the
Approval of site plan and any civil construction plans
all of
as
the-
necessary.
And you mentioned screening,
Landscaping and screening.
landscaping and
required.
screening. So there's not actually any screening requirements on this one, is there?
I don't believe so. Anna has already reviewed the entry corridor and I believe has given approval.
Definitely. I'll second that motion.
Motion by Tim and second by Jim. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Thank you, sir. All right, let's go to public hearing 5C. Request Z 2216 by Ronnie and Norma Crossline to consider a conditional use permit for section 3.110 to operate a STR unoccupied in R2 zone area located in the historic overlay district on property located at 112 East Schubert. Entertain a motion to open public
I'll
hearing.
make a motion, we open the public hearing.
Second by Jim, second by Tom. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Mr. Crossland, you here? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Ronnie Crossland, my wife Norma. We have a property at 112 East Schubert. It's zoned R2 already. There's several B&Bs all around us. And we're asking for a conditional use, short-term rental permit. And we've met all the requirements as far as the parking and all that. And so we'd just like for your consideration of this project. Y'all, if you have any questions.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who'd like to speak concerning this application?
Second.
Motion by Tim, a second by Jim. Close the public hearing. Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We'll go to action item number 6C. Discussion, consideration, and recommendation regarding request Z 2216 by Ronnie and Norma Crossland to consider the conditional use permit. Gary, comments?
So again, this is a very similar situation. It's in an R2 zone in the historic district, which does require a CUP. Prepared another map that's on the dais showing the adjacent uses. It's immediately adjacent to C2 zoning to the east and then R2 all around. There are a number of varied uses in the area, secondary residences, and a large number of STRs, as well as commercial and retail uses. We did receive 3 letters of support relating to the project. I noted where those are. They're 109, 111 East Schubert, and there's also one on Cora Street at 403 Cora. So similar to the other one, we are recommending approval of the application for a CUP conditioned upon review, inspection, and approval of the STR permit application and payment of applicable fees.
Question? What does it mean by secondary residence?
So a second home, not the primary residence.
And then but the adjacent property, 108, is a residential use. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Are these the old Avery houses?
Yeah, next door.
The one right-
That's their secondary home. They have a home in Houston.
No,
At
I mean, the
108.
one, your subject property, was that originally Avery?
No,
That
no.
was not open.
We bought that home from the Copes, the
Oh, yeah, okay.
Fredericksburg really.
So I guess I do have one question about this, because it's probably more a matter of semantics. But as you put in our packet, it is surrounded by STRs. However, if I'm looking at the map that you provided, it's the first one we had, it does indeed have every such your property STR. Whereas this one immediately adjacent to the west, and across the street, looking north and south, are deemed as residential uses.
So there is a correction there. When we first drafted the packet, and I apologize, that was the best available data we had. As we looked into it further, we found various uses around it. So that was a concern, but overall, this area seems to be primarily STRs and second homes. So we felt that it does qualify or meets the criteria for the conditional use permit.
And it's an R2 zone, so by right, they can use, they have one unit. The only variance here is the fact that it's historic.
So if it wasn't in a historic district, they could have it.
All right.
That's correct.
So all we're deciding on is whether it's historic or not.
So how many does this meet what's the new standard is, what, 75% on the block?
That's for R1.
Is that
So
R1?
the only reason it's here is because it's R2 in the historic district.
Right.
Yes,
If
sir.
it was R2 straight, it would be right.
Yeah, well,
Right.
I understand that.
Well, we really took into consideration the location next to Buck O'Brien's and the convenience store.
That's a penalty.
And the owner of track 108, did they respond at all?
We did not receive a response. Were you saying that that's actually their second home?
Yes, they have, that may be their third home. They have one in
Okay.
Kerrville, and they have one in Houston, and then this one. And I don't know which one of the 3 that, they're remodeling the one next to us. And they're either gonna move back to move to Kerrville or Houston, but they're gonna sell one of those.
Which Avery's in?
I don't know that it was an A,
Oh,
it's just the next one.
The Averys did have a home. They did, I think they own the one next to us and then the next one. I'm not positive.
All right, I'll make a motion, we approve Z 2216 as presented with
Staff recommended.
staff recommendations.
Second.
Motion by Jim, and second by Tim. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
The first one was the example of the donut. This one's just
In between.
doesn't have an example.
More of the area. All right. We're going to go to action item number 6D. Requests SP Site Plan 2213 by John Furr with Root Architecture to consider a duplex residential development located at 618 West 5 Oak Street. Mr. Furr. Back again.
Hi, how are y'all? So the project is a development of 21 duplex units, all the same for a total of 42 two-bedroom dwelling units. We are doing something similar across the street over at 619, which you looked at for us last year and is currently under construction. We're just beginning. We have had our civil engineering team review the site plan, and they've checked grading, drainage, utilities, detention, impervious coverage, parking count, all the normal prerequisites. And after our initial submittal was looked at by the planning team, we made a few corrections, and I think we've got everything covered, all the boxes checked now. So hoping to get an approval.
Thank you. Shelby, you have any comments?
Just a few. Thank you, John. The application was submitted. I think it's important to note that the site plan was first reviewed on March 10th, which is prior to the April 1st adoption. So it was reviewed under the C1 zoning ordinance at that time, not the one after April 1st that we're currently under. It does meet all of the necessary requirements, including density, building coverage, impervious cover, height limitations, parking. Although commenting on parking, there is a small issue that the way that they parked it takes into consideration the 40% for compact cars, but they are over that threshold. What they're proposing is 42%, so we'd like to see a couple small modifications made to their parking to come into compliance with that. Otherwise, utilities, detention, park dedication fees of $500 per unit will be required prior to issuance of building permits. Screening is required along the northern property line. Unfortunately, it's not available on the screen. It is required along the northern property line that does require a minimum of a 6-foot wood or masonry fence. Landscaping is also required, and staff is recommending approval with conditions of a landscape plan, including screening, approval of civil construction plans, the park dedication is mentioned, compliance with the parking requirements, final plat approval, which they have received, and approval of an addressing plan.
Thank you, Shelby. Anybody have questions or comments?
I have one question. Are you going to allow people with extended cab Ford 250 and 350 trucks to park in your parking lot,
Sure.
mine?
like Darrell Whitworth's?
All will be welcome.
All will be welcome.
In fact, I would say we have room for more larger parking spaces than we have. Our civil engineers recommended this percentage, and it turns out they overdid it just a touch, but we'll put in a couple of extra wide ones if you like.
More parking is always better than less parking.
Agreed.
I'm concerned about the lack of parking. This is going to be a very congested corner. So the more parking, the better as far as I'm concerned.
Any other comments, questions?
So if we approve this with your recommendations, then you're going to address item 4 afterwards.
Yes, ma'am.
So y'all will come up with some solution for parking little differential.
Yes, ma'am.
I move we approve as presented.
Motion by Polly, a second by June. Any other discussion?
I do have one other item that's
Okay.
tangential, but I want to give Garrett an opportunity to speak to it. We are now at 117 to 118 residential units going in very close to the corner of Post Oak and West Live Oak. And these are two old county roads that are not much better than a paved cow path. So my question is, what's our plan to address the traffic flow and the increased traffic impact from all of these going in right in proximity?
So I definitely don't disagree that there's a lot of development going on in this area. As y'all are probably aware, there's 4 roadway extension projects that have been identified through a traffic impact study of the city. Those include the extension of Post Oak Road, which would be improved to tie into 16 and connect to the end of Cherry Street. So there would be a connection between 16 and West Main. There's also the Friendship Lane extension. It's always also been referred to as the Inner Loop project. So those are projects that are going to be contemplated. I don't have a timeline of when they will be completed. But as part of this development, the developer will either need to improve their frontages of these streets, installing curbs and improve driveways, or make an escrow deposit towards these future improvements. I will also say that staff is currently conducting traffic counts in this area. And based on some of the preliminary data I've seen, when the TriStar facility opens up, I anticipate an all-way stop being installed at the intersection of Live Oak and Post Oak, similar to a few other areas in town. So that's what I know of immediately.
Especially when school's going and traffic's going down to Heritage School.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Right now, those Post Oak is and Live Oak are inside the city limits.
Now they are.
They are now. So at one time, this intersection was kind of half city, half county. But because of the recent annexations, Post Oak and Live Oak are within the city.
And I would assume that that four-way stop will be much like the one that is on Milam Street with the lighted.
The blinky? Yeah, yes, illuminated.
That's a good deal. Helps all of us.
We may also look at speed limits in that area, coming in from Smokehouse. There's a lot of topography, and with all the school traffic from Heritage, we may look at that.
Well, isn't it already 30 miles an hour?
Well, it's 45 a little further out, but it does drop to 30, I believe.
I coasted down the hill one day and got stopped on Milam Street. It wasn't my idea to stop either. I did get a warning.
We do have a motion on the floor. Any more discussion? All right.
Just one quick question.
Uh-huh.
No sidewalk requirements?
No, sir, not in this area. We will be looking at sidewalks as part of the comp plan update, but the adopted sidewalk plan does not have sidewalks at this location.
Didn't we require developers to do
This would be developed under the adopted sidewalk plan, and that does not include sidewalks.
They get it passed.
If they want to put them in, that's great. But
TBD. I mean, it goes nowhere and it comes nowhere, but we gotta
Right.
start putting them in somewhere.
Yeah.
So,
I will say the plan for Post Oak does include sidewalks on both sides when it is improved.
that's a city ticket? Is it called?
It's a bond.
TBD.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
All right.
All opposed? All right, motion carried. Thank you. All right, let's go to action item number 6E. Request site plan 2214 by Randy Stabling with SKT Architects to consider a remote parking agreement for property located at 406 East Main Street. Mr. Stabling, we are ready for you.
Good evening, everyone. I agree with the statement made earlier this evening that more parking is better. I have to tell you, we don't have many clients that actually want more parking than the zoning ordinance requires. This is an exception. As the packet indicates, back in January, P&Z approved a remote parking facility for this property. Since then, our client, who we're currently under construction of their project, cut a corner from this property, which I'm sure you're familiar with. The immigrant approached us and felt that they really would like to provide more parking than was originally presented to Historic Review Board and Planning and Zoning. So this new plan basically adds 14 more spaces for a total of 28 spaces. It's right turn in, right turn out. The rendering was requested for Historic Review Board. There was 2 of them in there. Hopefully give you a little bit better idea what this is going to look like from Main Street. We've probably all gotten a little used to seeing the nice green open pasture there, so I understand that we might hate to see that go, but the owners intend to eventually likely develop a building on that site. But at this point, they would like to go ahead and increase the number of spaces to try to help reduce the congestion in that area of town. We all who live here know there's congestion everywhere up and down Main Street. So the property's there. This would not impede their intentions of developing the property in the future at this time, but would provide some much needed additional parking there. Comments in the packet from staff required a landscape plan. We're good on that. Interior landscaping, I think we can achieve that, no problem. And we've been in discussion with TxDOT for many months already on getting the agreement with them. We don't anticipate any problems there. So appreciate the opportunity to be here, and hopefully I can answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Randy. Shelby?
Mr. Staling provided a great summary of the project. The only thing that I would like to add is that this project was considered by Historic Review Board, both the site overall, including fencing, and it did receive approval at the July 12th meeting. Otherwise, the development is in conformity with staff's recommendations, including a landscape plan, as well as TxDOT approval, and staff recommends approval.
Yes, sir.
Question? So Randy, I see right in, right out, but all I see is markings on the rendering. Is there going to be anything more physical than that? Because
There will be signage in that median right there directing people that it is right in, right out. So they won't be allowed to do a left turn onto Main Street.
But my question is there any physical way to do a barrier to that? Because we know the signage doesn't work.
As far as directing them in and out of the parking lot,
Not directing them,
As far as restricting them from
restricting
coming
them not
from
to
West
be able
Main
to
and
take a
turning.
left.
I think the driveways will be positioned that way. And yes, at this point, all we intended to do was provide signage for that.
This has come before us once before, and it's a perfect example. It's right there in front of Whataburger. They were supposed to put some physical in where you could not cross into it, but that did not happen. And that's a cluster. It's the same configuration. It's one block off of, one building off of a corner. So I'm just curious if there's something that can physically be done to make sure nobody tries to attempt a left turn into.
Go to Burger King and look at what that island looks like down there. It's got tire marks all over it.
Yeah, but that's one we specifically requested they put in after the water.
Right.
After the Whataburger,
I
yeah.
understand.
Right.
I guess, Randy, the question, the V slices on the driveway.
Those are markings. Those are pavement
that are
markings.
just markings.
So we don't.
Would it be possible to just, instead of doing one wide cut with the markings on it, do 2 cuts? 2 separate driveway cuts so it's clear.
In our
that
initial
one-
discussions with TxDOT, they weren't open to that. So we're kind of balancing between, the requirements the city's asking us for. And if you've worked with TxDOT, you'd understand that their requirements are pretty stringent and difficult to work with. So what they're not going to go for 2 driveways. So the best we've been able to do is to mark it and to provide the island inside the property line, which the site plan shows, to try to direct people. And then we intended to put signage also entering and exiting the parking lot.
Yeah, probably the most important signage is for the exiting population.
Yes.
So
Entering won't be a
But I think
problem.
as Mr. Dooley's mentioned, even if it's hard. Some people are going to find a path, even if we put a barrier there. And the only thing even if TxDOT did approve it, would be a curb. And that doesn't, just yesterday, I saw a guy drive off a 2-foot curb on the east end of Main Street here with a trailer. So it's really hard to,
Well, the original TxDOT
prevents people from doing dumb things. So
the
Better
original.
said than what I would have said.
The original TxDOT approved for the Whataburger site was actually some noticeable size
The bubbles.
and those just did not get approved. Get installed, excuse me. And that was a TxDOT approval because we went through this long, painful, almost two-meeting discussion over this. So, I mean, that's just not, there's nothing whatsoever to obstruct the left turn off the main.
So one thing I would recommend, because the engineering department will be involved in this review and working with TxDOT, is add that as a condition, so TxDOT and city approval, and we will work with them. We do have some alternative options that we're looking at using on the short-term projects we've discussed that could potentially be utilized here. There are some potential drainage impacts we want to be involved in. So in addition, under the recommendations and conditions, I would include city site plan approval, site or civil construction plan approval. That allows staff to have another
And we'd
review.
absolutely support that. I have no problem with that.
Say that again so we can get it in record. City site plan approval.
So in addition, so number one, landscape plan, including screening per 7.940, as well as site/civil construction plan review and approval by city staff. And then under condition number two, I would say add city to that, TxDOT and city approval of the proposed driveway. And then we'll work with Randy and TxDOT to address it.
We're all on that. No problem.
So Randy, on this picture that we're looking at here, TxDOT says that you can't put anything in the slope of the driveway.
In our preliminary discussions with them so far,
You couldn't
that's
put
how I
any
understand.
kind of a barrier like a 2x3 piece of limestone there that would keep them from turning left.
No.
It's because it's a driveway.
Yeah,
the whole
they
thing
don't
has to
they
stay
don't want
clear.
any obstructions in their right of way that people can run into.
They consider it a clear zone. So as Randy mentioned, they don't want obstructions.
Yeah.
But again, there are some other alternatives we can look at.
It's back to the difference in perspective on the use of the street.
So
We
I
have a different perspective.
another question on the number. I'm glad to see the increase in the number of spots in the development that perhaps might take place in the adjacent property. Would this parking facility, could this parking facility be used for any kind of development that was next door, or is this standing alone? As opposed to.
Well, at this point, there are no plans for that, so I can't really speak to that. All I can say is that this exceeds the requirements that are required for the property of which the permit is currently exist with the city.
Then here's my other question. Is this going to be public for everybody, or is this going to be limited to the immigrant?
It is not intended to be public parking.
Okay. Are you going to?
But
It's not controlled.
But it's not controlled, right?
I'm sorry?
It's not controlled.
Controlled?
Controlled access.
There's not going to be arms.
No, it's
or-
not. It's on an honor
guard.
system. It will be signed that it's for the owner's property across the street, but that's it. There's not going to be any kiosk there or
And Tom,
someone monitoring
If
that.
this is designated and approved as off-site parking for the immigrant, it cannot be double use. So when the next project comes along, they
They'll have to come
provide.
back.
Correct.
Right.
With
Of
different
the 28 spaces, 14 are dedicated to the immigrant.
Right.
We have to have those for the immigrant to operate. The
Right.
additional 14 are there because the owner understands
Right.
that
And that
they
was-
have, in other words, they have the dirt available. It's just sitting there.
Right.
So they said, let's try to help the congestion downtown and provide a little bit more
And
parking.
I applaud that, and that was my question. The other 14, if there is a development next door, there's the possibility that since those are extra to this project,
It can
they
count.
could
I think it
count.
would be reasonable to assume that if they could have developed
Okay.
that property that needed 14 spaces, I think it's reasonable
Right.
to assume that they may approach the city and request that those 14 spaces be dedicated for that. I think based on the scale of that property, they're going to need more than 14 spaces probably for most any use.
Oh, yeah.
And at that time, I think most certainly the logical thing is that they probably relook at the whole property, realizing that the 14 spaces that are dedicated to the immigrant cannot go out of operation
Right.
during the time that the immigrant is operating. They're fully aware of that. So any development in the future would have to juggle all of that.
I gotta believe that one of the biggest signs that they will have in that parking lot is if you don't belong here, we're gonna tow you off.
So Randy, looking at a Google Earth shot of this, will there be any removal of existing angle-in parking on Main Street? Make this entrance and egress?
That's a good question. The answer is no, I don't think so.
It
No,
looks like
and in
they've
fact,
looked
I
at-
think, I think if anything, it's probably going to add the ability to add some there. So TxDOT, in discussions with them, they still would like to see, while that's not been set in any agreement yet, of retiring or closing the other driveway and that exists. So there's two of them on the property. We're suggesting utilizing the one on the west end of the property. If indeed they require it to be closed, that would probably open up the ability to have two, if not three more spaces added on Main Street.
I move we approve SP 2214 with the following conditions. Number one, a landscape plan including screening per section 7.940, a site and civil construction plan approval by the city, and prior to review of the building permit application per section 7.92. And number two, both TxDOT and city approval of the proposed driveway.
I'll second that.
All is June. Any other discussion? Favor aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Randy.
Thanks, Randy.
Let's put action item number 6F, the request Dale Self-Fire Survey to consider a replat property located at 132 South Mile in Phase 1 of the Color Oaks development.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is P.V. McMinn Jr. I'm the original developer of Keller Oaks and the Director of Operations for New Vista Development. We are requesting that you approve our replat of our townhome lots, which will constitute Phase 1 of the Keller Oaks development. These townhomes will be super high-end custom townhomes. Quite a few, if not all, built to suit. This replat comports with the original conceptual design that I submitted for the conditional use permit quite some time ago, and nothing has changed. So we're poised to answer your questions.
All right, thank you. Shelby?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McMinn. As PV mentioned, this development received the conditional use permit approval to develop townhomes and condominiums back. They actually submitted their application in 2019, but the approval was received in 2020. And they are now before us today with a replat application to develop the townhome lots in conformity with section 7.610. They meet the requirements for that development, and staff recommends approval with the following conditions. Parkland dedication of $500 per lot.
Say that one more time.
Park dedication,
Oh, park dedication.
yes, sir, of $500 per lot. Review and approval of civil construction plans, including any required offsite easements. Review and approval of building plans in conformance with the townhouse residential uses, and compliance with the previously approved conditional use permit, and that does include sidewalks.
Thank you, Shelby. Anybody else have any comments, questions?
Did this meet with the approval of fire marshal for emergency vehicles getting back, since there's only one entrance and one exit?
that big giant cul
Yes, that was part of the conditional use permit approval. There are some concerns with the slope of the roadway going up the hill along Highland Boulevard that we'll work through as part of the civil construction plan review. That was the major concern.
So would there be the need to get a ladder truck back?
I really can't speak to that. I just know he's looked at it and will continue to look at it through the site civil construction plan phase, but felt the access was adequate. The need for secondary access is triggered with 30 lots or 30 units.
Thank you.
So we looked at this in, I remember this one. We looked at this in 2019, 2020. It must have been before I rolled off.
100 years ago.
Is this the entirety of the townhome lots for this? This is just one phase?
This is phase one of the project, and it's the 21 townhome lots, and there will be no more townhomes at this point. The remainder of the project is condos and professional office space,
Okay,
as it stands today.
okay. I seem to recall there was something else on here
Yes.
from before, and it's not there now, so that's why I was curious. Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Make a motion to approve with everything Shelby said.
Motion by Jim, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Polly. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, motion carries.
Go build it.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Hope we can afford lumber.
All right, let's go to item number 3, approval of the minutes for the July 6th meeting.
I make a motion, we approve them.
A motion by Jim. Do I have a second on the minutes?
Second.
Do you have anything on the minutes?
Yes. I'll go through them. I've already given them to Shelby, but I'll just get them in the record. On page 5, the motion to approve the minutes, the second was either by Steve or Jeff. We'll have to clarify which one of them seconded the motion. Shelby said she'd go with it. Page 10, at the top, based on staff's review, instead of staff can recommend, it should read staff recommended, past tense. Page 10, and then at the bottom of that particular section, Jim Giroux made a motion, et cetera, et cetera. It says per staff recommendation, and then the rest of it should say except to strike contributions to Sunrise Street paving. We didn't strike the entire Sunrise Street improvement section. We only struck paving section. And just to make it clear that we were only talking about that. And then on page 11, 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down from the top, is just missing the word screening at the front of the first sentence. It starts with the word required. There's no name.
Did Emily send those red lines to you?
She wasn't here.
11.
Well, I did make that second, Jim's motion. I've been called a lot of things, but not Steve Lawrence.
Sing us a tune, please.
All right, and Shelby's got all those.
That's just like he quarterback.
I knew that was good.
All right, so
So I
Jim, do you want to
move we
take your
approve
motion?
with corrections.
Yes.
All right,
I wanna-
Retract
I make a
yours.
motion, we approve it with those nitty little corrections.
I'll second.
Motion by Jim, have a second by Polly. She beat you to it. All right, any other discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, those are approved. And let's go to item number 8, discussion items and possible action. Item A, presentation of affordable housing by Vince and Michael. Is it Michael or Michelle?
Michelle.
Michelle, excuse me. Affordable Housing Coordinator.
You're not the first, believe me.
So Chair and Commission members, so Vince recently gave an update to the city council regarding his report that's been finalized now. So we asked Vince we felt it'd be a good idea for y'all to hear it as well. So I've asked Vince to be here tonight, and I appreciate you being here. So I'll
Thank
turn
you.
it over to
And
you.
Madam Chair, thanks for inviting me. I've had the pleasure of being introduced and visiting with some of the commissioners, and look forward to introducing myself and visiting with anybody else. If anybody would like some phone time or some one-on-one time, I'd be more than willing to visit with you and answer any questions. I can stand up here and bloviate for forever, and y'all got a full house here, and I want to make sure that if there's any specific questions that anyone might have at this particular time, I want to make sure that I leave some time to do that. Just quickly, I was contracted in February through the EDC as the Affordable Housing Coordinator, basically a contract position for a 12-month period. I was tasked with a variety, about 14 tasks subject to the Affordable Housing Initiative here in the community. I have been starting to tick those off. One of the things that I felt was very important was a comprehensive housing study. So that was the first thing that I did and completed, and had the opportunity to present that study. And I believe Garrett has forwarded that to you. It's kind of a long read, and so I don't expect for you guys to have digested it at this point. But again, specifically as it pertains to land use and zoning, which is, prime for you guys. One of the additional things that I've been working on is a land use and zoning study as a supplement to the housing study, and in anticipation of working with a new development director and subject to the work that you guys are going to be doing on updating the comprehensive plan, that will be in coordination and conjunction with that to assist going forward on that. So again, I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of folks and do a lot of assessments here. And so I'm in the process of trying to work through some plan of actions on what I recommend, subject to units of government, what I would recommend they do, the retail, the developers. So just kind of a general idea. And I'm really trying not to reinvent the wheel. I've been looking at like-kind communities, whether it's the ski communities in Colorado or Hilton Head in South Carolina or Bernie or whatever, of looking at what these communities, after they have identified the fact that obviously, like everybody else, they have an affordable housing issue, what is there available to them and what steps could be taken. So really looking at other communities and trying to leverage what they have done and what's been effective and what's not been effective in those communities. So one thing I've said is that, especially for small communities, is that in order to fix the affordable housing issue that you have, is nobody is going to walk in the door and fix it for you. It's going to be something that you have to identify and provide time, effort, and local resources in order to fix the problem, because the problems are unique. Fredericksburg is very unique. Okay, it's not you can't really compare it to a lot of the smaller communities in Texas because of its demographics and its economy. It's more appropriate to Avail or something like that with respect to its cost of housing and the short-term rentals and the investors that are coming in. So there are specific items that you look to in those communities that you can leverage. And again, what's worked, what doesn't work, what's politically palatable for the community, all of that needs to be taken into consideration. So part of the housing study is one of the things that I started with. And again, I'm in the process of communicating and getting a little bit more in depth in some of the recommendations that I've made. So at this point, I can open it up to some questions if y'all have them, and maybe start a quick process of conversation here.
Could you kick us off with just like a high level overview of what you found and what your recommendations are?
Yes. Again, Fredericksburg is very unique. And what really is what the first thing that I saw is that there's a lack, because again, a lot of times availability drives affordability. And there simply has not been enough housing constructed in Fredericksburg over the last 10 to 15 years. That has caused and obviously, when you have an imbalance in supply and demand, obviously you're going to create an issue where there's a higher demand, so it's going to push prices up. That's both in single family and especially in the multifamily, which deals more specifically with the local lower socioeconomic cohorts that you would have in the community. I don't believe that there's been a multifamily development that's actually been built here over the last decade, maybe even 15. So one of the items is, and I'm encouraged by the fact that the development department at the July 5th meeting has said that there are 900 units of housing that's proposed to be developed here. So I say build it all, build as much as you can. I can't tell you there's been an inflection point subject to with mortgage rates and the cost of development. So I can't tell you how much of that is actually going to be built, but I would love an oversupply, because what's happening is that you're looking at multifamilies that were built 30 years ago that are still demanding top dollar. So if you're building additional Class A facilities above that and oversupplying, then it's gonna put downward pressure on some of the older and turn them into Class Bs and Class Cs. So simply by availability and oversupplying the market, you can impact the affordability. You're also obviously dealing with just as simply, again, real estate. Always you always hear about location, location, location. So it starts and stops with the dirt. And if you're looking at a residential lot that starts at 100,000, then you can guarantee that you're going to be out of a affordability component for the vast majority of the residents. What I found in talking to the developers is that what's really has been driving, especially the single family market, is not internal demand. It is those high net worth individuals that are coming in and retiring here or wanting second homes. So all of the time and the effort and the land resources that you have are not being availed to the internal folks that already live here or already need housing here. So it's being used up by external. I just noticed in all of the planned multifamily is that all of the zoned R3 property now in town has been spoken for. So if you take all of them, I don't believe there's another zoned R3 property that doesn't have a planned development already proposed on it. That plus the school district acquiring that property on Friendship, most of that was zoned R3. That's no longer off the table. And additionally, in discussing with some of these developers and what they are planning on these multifamilies, it's again the luxury high-end units that again are using up a valuable resource, which is you have a very limited resource of available development land, but it's all being taken up by people that can only afford it. In other words, they're making 140, 150% of the average median income. So there's a mismatch of what's being developed versus the need. The need primarily is for those individuals that are making between, let's say, 80,000 a year and below. And that, yes, sir. That's correct. And the reason why they can't, it's not that they don't want to, but when you look at the cost of the dirt, the cost of the development, the fact that lumber prices, they have gone down substantially, but lumber prices quadrupled. They're waiting months and months for windows and appliances. they can't get subs coming in from San Antonio or Austin. The subs will charge 3 times just for the headache of having to drive here. So it's literally the economics of these developers that are saying that, look, we're not making a killing here. We're based on our cost, we're going to have to charge $1,800 a month, $2,000 a month for a 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom apartment, simply just to cover our mortgage. So it's not that they don't want to right now, based on the economics, that they can't. So I'm hoping, as again the price of lumber has dropped substantially, some of the supply chain is moving. I'm hoping with an oversupply, with the mortgage rates that have come up, I anticipate that there could be up to a 25 to 30% reduction in the home prices over the next 2 to 3 years. That's what I'm projecting, but I can't hear. Yes, that this is the it's specific to, and we're more in the Austin market, so our Austin market went way out of norm, and based on historical context, it is expected to revert back to the norm, which would expect to be about a 30% reduction. Now that there's a lot of caveats. It's like the stock market. You can look at technical analysis and make your best guesstimate, but macroeconomic factors, a substantial slowing of the inflation, so that the Fed continues not to taper with interest rates going back down. It could shoot back up. So I'm expecting it to, but I can't promise it. I'm hoping that it will. But in that regard, if the average cost of your house right now is $600,000, big deal if it drops 20 or 30%. It's still going to be unaffordable. So you have to start looking at, well, what can we do in order to effective change in the affordability beyond just like I said, beyond just the availability of oversaturating a particular market and causing an imbalance back to the supply side, so that the cost of the housing, whether it's rents or whatnot, goes down. So they'd love to. There's developers out there that would just love to come in here and build affordable because they know the demand. The risk return for them, if they know they can go into a market and build 200 units and have a 3-year waiting list, their rent risk goes down to nothing. So they're really willing to take a lesser return because they know that they're going to get, the demand's there, and they're not going to all of a sudden be 80% full.
Joe's second question, do you think that our most urgent and or larger issue is the rental market, or is it the home ownership market?
It's the rental market. Absolutely. The housing study identified, subject to the number of jobs that are being posted right now, and in combination, the number of individuals that are having to commute into the community. I assess that there's probably a shortage of multifamily rental in the thousands, probably about at least 2,000 units, but that's not $2,000 a month rental units. That is what I would consider fair market rents. If you look in the housing study, identified that. What the fair market rents is they'll take an assessment. They say like all of the 2 bedrooms in town, okay, and here's the cheapest, here's the highest, and they'll rate them all. Okay, fair market rents is like at the 40 percentile. So 60% of the 2 bedrooms charge more, 40% charge less. So a lot of the affordable housing developers kind of use those fair market rents. It's HUD published is what it is. They'll use that to make the assessment of affordability. So instead of a 2,000, then they would try to bring the market rent rate in around, let's say 1,400 or 1,200 or something like that. So.
And was your focus on the study just the city limits, or was it countywide?
It was It was primarily city. The county has obviously has a role to play, but the control with outside the ETJ and the city and the ETJ is not there. So it is developed more organically. So my focus was what control does the units of government and where is the vast majority of the development going? It's impossible, although we just talked to a developer down there at just the other day at Lukenbach Road that's putting in that big development. They're proposing 450 units of multifamily, and they're not tying in. They're using their own water and wastewater on site. That is extremely unique. The vast majority of these multifamily developers have absolutely no experience in going out into a county and drilling wells and making some wild fangled aerobic systems. They've got so much work and everything. I mean, you know, they're having to jump over 15 communities to get to yours. So, so it's a very unique situation. So really what my focus was within the city limits, the ETJ, and then in proximity to where water and wastewater out the, you know, the particular thoroughfares for future development. So that's really kind of what I was looking at. But again, primarily for the multifamily, if any is going to come in, it's going to be within the city limits or adjacent within the ETJ, because it's going to need to be able to tie in.
So, go ahead.
Did you share your findings with the county commissioners court yet?
Yes, my understanding, I believe that we submitted that to them.
Have y'all gotten any reaction from them?
I have not. Have y'all heard anything?
It was briefly discussed at the joint meeting between the city council and the commissioners court on this past Monday. I believe, I'm not for sure what the next steps were, but what they would possibly discuss was another workshop to sit down with Vince and talk about it and kind of the next steps.
So my reasoning is some of the anecdotal information that was shared with me was that this is a city problem and the county does not have a housing problem.
Yes.
And they're approving plenty of developments. They are approving them left and right. And this is specifically a Fredericksburg problem, in their opinion. So just so you know, you've got some commissioners who have zero interest in dealing with this.
The Lukenbach Road, 450, that's RV pads at $79,900 a piece.
Yeah.
And then you can put a tiny home on it for another $100,000. So the question I have, Vince, and this is I think, a very good housing study. When you talk about units of government, basically what we're saying is the city of Fredericksburg and Gillespie County.
And the school district.
And well, okay.
Yes.
All right. And then, so in your look at the properties, I think you have identified the property that the city has on Friendship Lane, the 10 acres that for some kind of a development there.
It's right. Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you talked to the Hill Country Memorial about their property on Highway 16 South?
Initially, I made some initial inquiries on that property. Going back, and that's one of the things I want to discuss with the commission is, and looking at the ordinances and the zoning, I looked at public land and what are the approved uses and also the conditional uses for public land. And one of the things that is not on the list as a conditional use for public land is any type of housing, whether it be student housing or workforce housing. So before any discussion is made for the potential use of public land to be used as workforce housing, whether it's donated, leased, or sold, there need to be a discussion and of the potential revision to the ordinance to include student housing and or workforce housing to be approved as a conditional use for public land.
I would think that would occur after there's been some kind of discussion about we would be we, the entity, whether that be the FISD or Hill Country Memorial, agree in principle to the need to subsidize the affordable housing issue, and then it would go to the city, I would think, to look at at a land use change to enable that to do so. It would seem to, we've known for many years that we have a lack of housing, of what is termed, attainable housing. And that's due to numerous factors, the popularity of our community. I was using Fredericksburg and Gillespie County as an example of supply and demand in the marketplace 15 years ago. So I think a question is that if this is directed at the city, it seems that we as a community are going to have to make some decisions about what kind of subsidy is our community willing to do. How much of a subsidy? 10 acres on Friendship Lane is nothing. There's some question about that property anyway, about whether it's available. So it seems to me if our community is serious about affordable housing, the next step would be for us to talk about how do you go about acquiring property that is contiguous to the city, where that property would be, and how much that property would cost the taxpayers in a bond issue.
So I'm interested in hearing what your recommendations are from this study.
As I said, is that developers would love to come in here and build affordable, but economically they cannot. So in order to attract a developer, to incentivize them, to enhance them, to participate in, so they're jumping over a lot of communities that they don't have to come all the way to Fredericksburg. They've got plenty of work and plenty of communities that are participating, is that you're going to have to, as Mr. Musselman mentioned, you're going to have to provide some type of incentive, and usually that incentive is tax abatements, tax exemptions ad valorem, and or the provision of public land, because what you give, you're expecting to get back in some form or fashion, and typically that's a guarantee that what they're going to be building has a built-in affordability to it. That we're giving up this, we expect you to have the capacity to reduce your rental incomes to meet these needs and restrict this community that you're building to a particular economic cohort. In other words, you can't let anybody that's making more than 70 or 80% of the average median income. You're ineligible. So you're targeting this group. So you're saying, what are we getting back for in essence, our investment? Right.
Good land in the mix. Flooding was open-ended.
Right.
40%.
Right. Right. Yeah, the idea is.
So the other cities, so you've got examples of other cities who have taken this approach, and do you have
I have developers right now that are contracted with property in Fredericksburg that are sending me proposals saying if I can receive a particular ad valorem tax exemption, I will build units here with a particular affordability component. So I've already started reaching out. So if instead of examples, I can actually give you proposals that I'm starting to receive.
So let me kind of reframe my question. So we've had a bit of a checkered history with inviting people and incenting people to provide affordable rentals, affordable home ownership, and we've not had really good success.
Right.
Like that. And so what I'm asking is a couple of questions. Number one, how many cities actually got what they were looking for in the deal? How many of the developers actually adhered to the deal? And what happened to that property after 10, 15, 20 years? What was the ultimate result? Because for us, you know, our city has value and our community has value. And if it's done right, it can fit in with everything else and it doesn't degrade the overall value of the community. But if it's done wrong,
Right.
it can seriously degrade the value of the community and also create animosity within the
Right.
community over time. So
Understand.
I'm looking for some success stories where some other towns have done it well. And it didn't just work year one, it worked year 15. Because we've seen a lot of developers walk in with great slick presentations. And at the end of those presentations, my reaction has been, the taxpayers are going to pay a lot of money, and the landowner and the developer are going to pocket a lot of money. But at the end of the day, we're no further along than where we were when we started. So why should we make the taxpayers make an investment with a negative return if we can't see a structure that's going to create the outcome that we're actually looking for?
Right. Let me
Not necessarily, but
let me answer it this way. Most of, if not all of these developers that are getting involved in these public-private partnerships are not fly-by-night. These are extremely high net worth that have done thousands and thousands and thousands of developments. It is their business model. If they screw up or screw a city and word gets out, they are in essence out of business. So one of the things that you do is your due diligence, proper due diligence, and you're not going to partnership or get involved with anyone that doesn't not have a track record that you have actually gone back and contacted, you know, prior communities that they've worked with and contact them and that type of thing. So that, to me, that's always been good. Again, that my background is part of is finance and financial analysis and assessments and due diligence and that type of thing as well. So the other thing, and what I've been discussing about is stand up a unit of government that has the expertise in order to be able to assess these type of deals. I don't expect P&Z or city council to be able to take a look at a 50-page, very complicated development proposal, which I just got last night. But having standing up, and what I have been recommending is a public facilities corporation that has a separate autonomous board that are filled with individuals that have the expertise, attorneys, real estate people, somebody like me as the executive director that have the experience that can look at look at this stuff and call BS and know it right away and have track records. Some of them, they are in the development proposal that I got today is they are discounting the affordability by restricting half of the units to individuals that are 80% and below average median income. They're looking for a full ad valorem tax exemption, but they are making a payment back to the Public Facilities Corporation as a pilot or a payment in lieu of taxes. So the facility gets a full ad valorem tax exemption. The PFC participates to the tune of, and I only looked at it for about 10 minutes, but they will receive a payment in lieu of taxes plus 25% of the revenue. So the PFC will be receiving approximately $1.3 million annually off of this project. So that builds up. And so next thing you know, within 3 to 5 years, the PFC has accumulated $5-6 million in funds that then it's self-sustaining. Then you're not, in essence, continuing to go back to the the taxing community, you're using one or two of these projects in essence to supplement and provide cash flow for your public facilities corporation. And then over the years, it will actually use that money to buy the property in that respect. So there's a million ways to skin the cats on these deals. It depends on the developer. If you have a piece of public land, then if you control the land, then you have the opportunity through a PFC to go out and do requests for proposals and say, hey, I want to see, from 20 or whoever responds. We've got a piece of property here. We're willing to provide, the property and an ad valorem tax exemption. What are you going to give us back? So,
Across the board tax authority exemption, which is
across the board, school, city, and county, all taxing entities.
Okay.
Yes.
We're the tail wagging.
Have you talked to the school district about the effect of taking property off the tax off the rolls and what it would do to, the effect it would have on FISD? Well, the question that I've got, that's why I brought up the bond issue, is if we take land off the rolls, we're taking that land off the general fund. That land is not, those taxes are not available to pay our policemen, to pay our parks, to pay our administration, to pay our streets, to pay our wastewater. That's gone. Okay? Forever.
Not
okay?
necessarily.
Well,
Some
okay.
of these consents.
Then it's not forever, it's 30 years. Okay, there's terms on that. But I think before the city of Fredericksburg decides to implement that, they need to look at long-term how much tax revenue is going to the developer, how much tax revenue, what benefit, what's the cost benefit analysis for the city. The city just gave a huge, with the creation of the MUD, they just gave a very big subsidy to a developer that is going to enable them to put infrastructure in. But the question that was not answered with that was how much is that going to reduce the cost of housing and what's the housing going to come in? It was a $16 million gift to the developer, but we don't know what kind of gift it was to the people that are going to move into the houses.
So back to your point, there's at least been two pieces of property. We're not contributing to this. Buying this now, or this out. One of them we've been taking part of this funds. We ended up last time we got like 600,000 and not use this. That's
well, and that's also an ideal piece of property for a neighborhood park. If you look at the number of people that are living on the south side of town in that area, especially with the development that's about to happen out there, that's on the books right now.
So people to even run it. So my question is,
are you talking about the
Okay,
pool?
we're getting off subject
we
here.
have a super dire need for some housing, and we've got all those things, but do we have the fortitude to do it? I don't think we do.
Well, I think
So,
that,
So we're
folks,
getting
to
off
pull
subject
this
here.
back
Yeah.
to what we're talking about.
Yeah, we can't solve it
Can-
tonight.
So
Can I make
were
one
there
comment
any
on that?
key comments you
Yeah.
wanted to give us from the housing study?
Yes. First of all, the Friendship Lane track. I took a look at the visioning plan. I actually put a site plan together that has for that track has got a community center, a childcare center, recreational on it, as well as 90 units of housing. So it kind of hit all of the needs that you have. So there's a variety of uses. But really what this gets back to, and this is what I was discussing with it.
We do have the money in our dedication fund, and we can pay for a lot of because you're not using it.
This is a conceptual discussion. And that's what I'm getting at is there has to be you crossing the Rubicon as units of government, okay? For our entire existence, we've never had to worry about housing. The private sector has always provided enough housing and the affordability of housing, okay? That model is broken and it's never going to get fixed. So you have to then start looking at, well, is it right and proper for these units of government to, in essence, get involved in the development of housing? And so you have to start looking at, well, is workforce housing essential? If it is essential for your, for your teachers and firemen and first responders and everybody else, okay, it is essential. It's just as essential as the things that you're already providing. The reason why you provide the things that you do now is that there is not a profit motive for them. That's why the city has to do it. So all of a sudden, affordable housing, there's no profit in it anymore. So you may have to take up that mantra and develop it on your own with the use of public funds. So once you identify the fact and conceptualize that workforce housing is essential, and it then becomes viewed as a public facility. Once it becomes viewed as a public facility, there are statutory laws, the public facilities law in the state of Texas, that allows these units of government, whether on their own or in coordination with each other, to create a public facilities corporation to whether it's develop a wastewater treatment facility or do workforce housing. The law does not define what a public facility is. It's the community itself. If it determines by resolution that it is the policy now of this community that we view workforce housing within the defined context as essential and a public facility, and as such, we are going to stand up this corporation and invest in through the use of public funds, whether it's existing general revenue or you do a bond or tax incentives or tax abatements. You've got, for instance, the Type B sales tax funds that y'all are collecting now. Affordable housing is an approved use of those funds. I think this community decided to use those to reduce the property taxes, if I understand. So there are ways to do it, but it has to be at a conceptual level first, because you start getting into all this detail about the deal here and the deal there, but you don't answer the two questions. If you go over that and you make that determination and make it policy, everything else will flow in. The establishment of a PFC, that's simply the vehicle. Okay, you may never do a deal, but the city itself cannot legally do the deal itself. Okay, there are certain things that the city cannot do. But if it sponsors a public facilities corporation, the PFC can do. So that's why there's a separation of establishing a PFC outside the purview of the city administration. The city can sponsor it. The city can have final say and approval over what this PFC does if it so chooses. But it legally has the capacity to act where some of the things the city can't do. In other words, the city can't take a mortgage on a piece of property. Correct? They can't borrow money on a piece of property.
Right.
They can do a revenue bond.
Right.
Right.
You can't just go to a bank and get
Right. Right. A PFC can, and that's the one example. So if you got into a partnership where there was some financing and part of, in other words, if the PFC was acting as a general partner, they would have to substantiate or provide the backing for a mortgage. So that's just one example. But the whole idea is getting over the concept. And then I go back to the public land. I don't recommend that you have a deal in front of you. You need to understand the concept, because once you change that policy, It's for the potential property that you own now and in your comprehensive plan for the property that the city may acquire 30 years from now. We're all gone, you know? So it's this concept that you've got to get over that hump first so that it is established, that policy, and from that, everything else will flow.
Great. We appreciate that. There's a lot of thinking to be done for everyone.
Correct.
A lot. So we
Yes.
appreciate you bringing all this information to us. A lot of work went into that, and we appreciate that. And if anybody else has any questions, as you said, they can contact you and
Absolutely, yes.
continue that
Yes,
discussion.
I'll be more than happy to visit with you on the phone or in person.
You ought to end all your presentations with, can I get an amen?
Thank you all.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Too bad you didn't have a crowd to stand up cheer too. Thank you. All right. Next item is 8B, comprehensive plan update. Garrett, you had some items to talk to us. Oh, is that Anna?
Anna's going to cover this one.
So the long-awaited comp plan is moving forward. We had a selection committee of staff that it came down to two consultants, but half won out. And so we will be taking that contract to City Council for adoption on the 15th of August.
HALF is the name of the company.
HALF.
HALF?
F-F.
HAFF.
Mhm.
Okay.
And they've done Ernie and Marble Falls as the closest ones they've done recently. So they'll be actually doing a comprehensive plan, and we're going to roll in a park master plan with that as well. There's some cost savings if we do those at the same time. And this isn't an update. This is the last time there was a full-on comp plan was 2006. So this will be a new
Starting
comp
from
plan.
scratch.
Starting from scratch. Full-blown deal, yeah. So your role as P and Z, you'll need to nominate someone to serve on our task force.
Someone from this group?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll have a steering committee.
Okay, I'll take bribes. Who all wants to be?
We'll have a steering committee, and then we will have stakeholder groups. And as it moves forward, they'll make presentations to P and Z and City Council or as it goes through adoption. One of HAF's things that we really liked on the committee was their public outreach. So they have some set, public meetings, but they've also got a program where they go out to existing events, right? They go to the football games and get people, make them aware, right? We're going to go to the people instead of, we know the turnout that we get if we have a 6 o'clock meeting on a Monday, and that's not enough. So public outreach is a very important component, and that will kick off this fall. And they were very clear that that's the best time of year to do that, right? When school's back in session and people are in their routine and here. So we'll have a committee. We'll have six meetings, including a vision and kickoff, goals and strategies, future land use, housing and economic development, parks and rec, and then a meeting to just if more time is needed, and then a draft plan review. We plan on reaching out. The focus groups would be large property owners, major employers, Gillespie County, the school district, community groups and organizations, real estate professionals, developers and builders, and other general residents with an interest. A pretty robust public outreach, working with the city's public information officer to get information out and to conduct online surveys and use social media. And again, having community events and workshops and public open house. And then, let's see. So at the beginning of the process, HAF will meet with the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council individually. And then you'll have a joint meeting with P&Z and Council 2 times. So in total, 3 community events, 3 open houses, 3 online surveys, 6 advisory committee meetings, 4 meetings with elected and appointed officials, and 10 focus group meetings. The timeline, they anticipate to be totally completed by, within 16 months. The price? $360,000. But that's with the park master plan as well.
Are you planning on purchasing some season ticket to the football game? That's a good place to hand out literature. 2,500 people every Friday night.
So when would this start? So as far, when do we
25,
need,
but-
by when do we need to have someone identified from this committee?
So I'll be reaching out soon. So like I say, it's going to council on the 15th, and then we'll start to frame out the calendar and when we want to start having these meetings. So you've got a little time.
All right, so if anybody's interested, other than Jim, if there's anybody else other than Jim's interested, let me know.
See, nobody's interested. I'll make a motion.
Okay, great, thank you. That's exciting. And the Parks Master Plan, have we ever done one of those before? Oh, long time ago,
Been a while.
even longer than the,
That's where we have the concept of neighborhood parks.
Yeah.
In the last.
no,
parks.
okay, good. All right, time for an update. All right.
We have Bronson. What else do we need?
All right, let's go to item 8C, possible rezoning of 500 block of West Live Oak.
So as you may recall at the last meeting in July, both P and Z approved a rezoning of the property at 528 South Milam. So the ultimate approval was to rezone the southern 3/4 of the tract to the C1 zoning to match that property across the street. But the northern half was left as R1 just to retain a residential buffer to Wall Street. And that line was based on the tract to the west. There's a small tract immediately to the west. If you look at page 96 of your packet or on the screen, it kind of shows that. So one of the discussion, or during that discussion, the idea of extending that C1 line to the west to meet up with the St. Vincent de Paul property was discussed. So staff did receive an agenda item request form, the first of its kind. So we're here tonight to discuss that further. If you do want to pursue this, we will need a formal motion to initiate that rezoning effort. At that point, we will prepare all the necessary documentation, the public notifications, and come back to you in September for the formal action. So we would be back in October. I apologize. But basically what's being proposed as shown on the map would be to extend that same east-west dividing line. It would impact a 0.828 acre tract to the west. The entirety of that tract would become C1 zoning. And then as you extend it further west, that entire tract is 3.56 acres. Approximately 1.34 acres of that tract would then become C1. The remainder would remain R1. During the discussion, and I think it was during the public hearing, a gentleman that is attempting to purchase I think it's the zero tract, the smaller tract, had indicated he would prefer to have C1. Of course, it's just under contract. He doesn't actually own the property, but staff does. Well, I guess we don't really have a recommendation. We need your recommendation to initiate, or your, what is it, formal action to initiate the rezoning. Yes.
So we make,
So this will be a city initiated rezoning.
That's
Not
correct.
requested by any property owner anywhere around.
That actually originated with us. It's a planning and zoning request.
Yes, it's actually a P&Z initiated zoning request. But we do know one of the potential property owners supports it. We would send out the notices, so we would, I assume, hear from the adjacent property owners if they protested.
You may remember you've done something like this similar with the property, the Avery tract.
Right.
You had rezoned that property to, I believe it was the West as well, the same zoning with Avery Tract had received.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Jim, a second by Tim. Any other discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, yes, please. Now, so you're going to put it on the, not on the agenda in September. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to get it done. All right. That's all we have on the agenda.
Can I discuss another possible request to them to evaluate? I know I'm probably gonna get some objection from some people, but it's been brought to my attention that the reason we're don't have nearly enough competition in the gas retailers is because of arcane, antiquated restriction on how many pumps we can have in town. I mean, it might have played a really important role back in 1985 when it was introduced, but we've now got to the point where we're being penalized as citizens. We're paying almost 30 cents a gallon more than everybody all around us because we are keeping artificially competition out because of this regulation. And I'd like to see us put it on an agenda item to discuss it, evaluate it, or at least ask city staff to evaluate it and see if there was any really good reasons why we should keep that in place. Maybe revisit it to make a modification to it.
So if you don't mind submitting the form,
I'll do
if
that.
you, that's.
So it can come to
and then-
individually from me, or has to come as a group? That's why I brought it up
It
tonight.
has your own signatures.
Yes, and so then you would need to get the appropriate number of signatures in support. And then once we have that, we'll add it to the agenda and determine what level of action is required. For this rezoning case, we needed formal action from y'all,
Yes.
but we'll just have to look at it.
Now, is that an ordinance change? Is that,
It's an ordinance.
It is.
So what is it now? What's the maximum?
Three islands.
Believe so. So it would probably be a rezoning effort.
It'd be a text amendment to the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, there, it's text amendment.
So it doesn't-
Text amendment to the ordinance.
Right, and it's initiated the same way as you just discussed on the item for West Live Oak. So you would need a motion of the body to initiate an application for a text amendment to the zoning ordinance for that purpose.
So that doesn't have to come as a request. That's something I thought we had to.
Right, well,
City
You
council.
need to submit the formal request.
you need an agenda item to take action on it. So
Okay.
on the next agenda, there could, or, at some point in the future, it could be on the agenda for you to discuss and take possible action to initiate that text amendment.
And I certainly don't have in my mind, I would not dream that I had the answer to how many of those we need. But I do know we turned away some requests for some competition because of that. And I think it's time we revisit it.
Okay.
Certainly.
Bring us the form.
I'll do it.
All right.
Thank you.
It's Jim's puppy request.
All right.
I'll be okay with that.
All right.
You've got Buc-ee's are like swimming in revenue.
Ready to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Second by Polly. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Some world is pretty.
Yes. I've been thinking a little bit about your request. Mulling it, contemplating it.
Well, I'm gonna give you
Purchased your property there, half mile south of Lukenbach there?
Joe, Joe, I would play a written wager with you right now. Somebody's gonna die there within the first 3 months of the month. Wait till Mike's still on the third one.